No matter how long you read superhero comics, you'll always stumble across a character that you've never heard of before. Oftentimes they'll be kind of whatever, like Texas Twister, but every once in a while you'll find a hidden gem with a story that really speaks to you. And for me, that's Crusader. This guy is a shape-shifting Skrull, and he went from being a silly side character to a full-blown hero that saved the entire planet from being annihilated. But the road to get there was difficult, as he not only became a traitor to his people, but he was tragically killed by the humans that he had given up everything he had ever known to save. Hello and welcome to Comic Drake, where I talk about comic books and my name is Drake. Let's talk about it. But before getting too far into things, I want to give a quick thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Ipsos I Say. The concept is simple. You can participate in research by taking quick and easy surveys, which allows you to earn extra cash through gift cards and rewards. They're a breeze to get through, so you can easily knock out a few while watching TV or, say, more of my videos. What's really neat though is that all the surveys are specifically tailored to your interests, so you're not stuck sitting through boring nonsense. There are many gift cards to choose from, but I personally prefer Visa because of the sheer versatility of it. I mean, heck, I just got the PC version of Spider-Man from one that I got from doing some surveys myself. Click the link to start earning rewards today with Ipsos I Say, and thanks again for supporting my sponsors so I can keep the lights on. But anyway, let's get back to the video. Robert Kirkman is one of my favorite comic writers, with him having created my all-time favorite series, Invincible. But he's also made other classics like The Walking Dead, Outcast, and so much more. One of the reasons that I fell in love with Invincible over a decade ago, though, was how it balanced the bright, endearing, and sometimes silly aspects of superhero comics, but presented them in a more grounded and realistic light. And when Kirkman wrote the Marvel Team-Up series in 2004, he brought that same energy to the book. Meet Curtis. Despite being between jobs, he's a pretty carefree guy that just likes vibing with his friends at the same old diner for breakfast every single morning. But one day when they left, he found a simple ring on the ground and took a liking to it. It didn't matter that his roommate rolled his eyes at his free dumb ring, Curtis still thought it was neat. Though unbeknownst to him, this seemingly random piece of jewelry was actually crafted from a shard of a cosmic cube, powerful reality-bending relics that are some of the most dangerous weapons in the Marvel Universe. The ring was secured by Captain America and was lost just as fast during a fight, and when it landed in Curtis's possession, he discovered that it was capable of creating anything he could think of within a 30-foot radius, so long as he kept his concentration. Though when summoning random shit started to get boring, Curtis decided to take inspiration from his roommate's insult and attempted to try his hand at being a superhero by taking up the identity of Freedom Ring. It's so obvious when you say it out loud, but this pun honestly took me by surprise when it was first pointed out. I love it. So, if you're a fan of Invincible, then you know where this is going. Despite having this insanely awesome and powerful power, Curtis had no actual combat experience, and he bit off more than he could chew by trying to take down the Abomination as his first opponent. Now, Freedom Ring started off strong by summoning a few massive blocks of concrete on him, but after shaking them off, Abomination took Curtis out with a single bone-shattering punch. Luckily though, both Spider-Man and the X-Men showed up shortly thereafter, and Curtis was taken to the hospital, but the fight left him paralyzed from the waist down. But that's when Curtis had an idea. The Freedom Ring was able to do all of this amazing stuff, so it would only make sense that it could help him walk again. And with a little bit of concentration, he was able to do just that. But there's one thing I forgot to mention. Throughout the story, Curtis had been dealing with a nosy neighbor who kept peeking out at him through their front door, and this time when he saw him, there was a confrontation. But to Curtis's surprise, the neighbor gladly welcomed him in and revealed that he was a shape-shifting Skrull. This is Zareg, and he went to Earth to spy on the Avengers. The only problem though is that right before he arrived, the team had disassembled due to the Scarlet Witch's mental breakdown. Not really knowing what to do, Zareg started living a normal life on Earth, but because he's, you know, a spy, he had just been listening in on everyone in the apartment building like his own little private reality TV network. However, Zareg was starting to get bored of snooping on everyone's personal life, and he thought it might be fun for him and Curtis to team up as superheroes because as a soldier, he had a lot of combat experience that he could pass along. Curtis accepted, and the two of them pushed the limits of what the Freedom Ring was capable of. The duo trained for 2 weeks straight, discovering that the ring could grant Curtis flight, super strength, and most importantly, enhance durability. Feeling confident in their abilities and teamwork, Curtis and Zareg, now taking up the name of Crusader, decided to get right into the field and take a proper swing at superheroics. And this time, it was another doozy. See, an evil Iron Man from another universe had been going around mopping the floor with the Avengers, but Crusader and Freedom Ring decided to try and take him on anyway. And it It did not go well, but despite getting the shit kicked out of him, Curtis got back up and went in for a second round. The evil Tony used his armor shapeshifting abilities to pierce Freedom Ring like a human pincushion, but this heroic gesture freed up an opportunity for Captain America to take out evil Iron Man with a simple bonk on the head with his shield. Though unfortunately, Curtis didn't make it. The story ends with Zureg back in his apartment, and it's revealed that he had taken the Freedom Ring off of his friend's very dead corpse and was now using it for himself to make imaginary Skrull babes feed him fruit. Now, as much as I did enjoy this story, the ending made Crusader a huge douchebag, and not in the fun, lovable jackass way like my favorite superhero, Booster Gold. But here's one of the reasons that I love long-running superhero comics. Because other writers had the opportunity to use previously established characters and concepts, they're able to take stuff that didn't really work well in the past and retool them to tell new great stories. And in my opinion, Crusader got one of the best redemption arcs. Following the superhuman civil war, a project called the 50 State Initiative was set up so that every state in America could have its very own super team. And on top of that, an academy was set up to train prospective heroes to make sure they had everything they needed to handle themselves out in the field. Avengers the Initiative was a pretty fun series that gave an opportunity for both lesser known and brand new characters to get a chance in the spotlight, which of course brings us back to Crusader. First off, his backstory was a lot more fleshed out, so now when Zureg arrived on Earth and discovered that the Avengers had disassembled, he found the next best way to gather intel on Earth's mightiest heroes: renting DVDs of their exploits from a local video store, which really dates the comic. The store's clerk was a massive superhero fangirl and introduced Zureg to all of the best broadcasts and red vines, and in no time at all, Zureg fell in love with her, that god-awful excuse for a candy, and the world of Marvel superheroes. Instead of spying on the apartment building, it's retconned that Zureg had discovered Curtis's powers by seeing him flying away from his place. But the most important change is that he didn't take the Freedom Ring for selfish gain. Rather, that in the Skrull military, when a brother in arms is killed, you honor them by taking up their weapon. In my opinion, this is a great change and adds a lot of depth to both the character and Skrull culture. But after the Superhuman Registration Act was passed, Zureg leapt at the opportunity to become a card-carrying member of the initiative. And even though many of his fellow cadets weren't team players and were oftentimes hot-headed, this new interpretation of Crusader was a serious and noble warrior, which put him in a difficult position considering that his identity as a Skrull was a secret to everyone. The Freedom Ring allowed for Zureg to bypass all the scans, as it made him a human on a molecular level, but he still had his tells. For example, Crusader would sometimes get homesick, but when he discovered that strawberries and pickles tasted like a fruit called tamanja berries, it would be his reminder of home.
It's not terrible. No, it's pretty bad.
One day in the cafeteria, though, Zureg saw Hank Pym eating the exact same dish, leading him to suspect that his superior was a Skrull as well, and this troubled him. To have a Skrull impersonate such a prominent superhero, something big must be brewing, which of course led to a dilemma. How could he pass along this knowledge to the rest of the initiative without revealing his own Skrull identity? This was the beginning of the Skrull's secret invasion of Earth, where they had been secretly replacing high-profile people for years in order to make the planet ripe for conquest. And when the plot came to light, nobody could be trusted. Another superhero named 3D Man discovered that his goggles allowed him to see through Skrull shapeshifting, and he began a crusade to purge the initiative of infiltrators. Zureg got wind of this, and when 3D Man arrived at their base to dispose of the little green men, he panicked about being discovered, and used the Freedom Ring to invert the goggles' polarity, making 3D Man see everybody but him as a Skrull, though of course that only worked while Crusader was nearby. Feeling outnumbered, 3D Man ran off to gather reinforcements. Stick a pin in that because he will be important later. Crusader fought on the front lines of the invasion, but the fear and paranoia being discovered grew worse and worse. Should he change back to his original form, pretend to be a sleeper agent and return to his people, or does he stand by his teammates knowing that if he's killed, he'll revert back and his bloodline will be shamed due to his betrayal? This was further complicated when Crusader went up against a super Skrull named Kartem, his best friend, who was also the one that gave him his iconic scar during a sparring match back in basic training, which he now wears as a badge of armor regardless of what form he takes. Terrified that Kartem would expose his identity, Crusader fought back, dealing a fatal wound in the process. Immediately overcome with grief, Zureg tried to heal his friend with the Freedom Ring, But Qvortrup refused. Zereg was desperate, and he knew that he could not live with the guilt of killing his best friend, and he desperately tried to encourage Qvortrup to live for their god. But with his dying breath, Qvortrup replied that he can see his friend no longer believed in the scroll way, and he died in his arms. In shame, Crusader accepted that he was a traitor to his race, vowed to be a protector of Earth, and to never change into a different form ever again. But most importantly, he walked away from the battle unscarred. The story gets a little bit of tonal whiplash though, because when Nick Fury told him that he had heard great things about him from Captain America, Zereg acted like an excited child, saying that there was nothing the Empire could do that would shake his love for the planet and the heroes that protect it. I mean, it's a cute moment for Crusader to be a little fanboy and geek out. Like, it's the same as when Ms. Marvel does it, but like, he had just killed his best friend 1 issue ago. I don't know, maybe show at least a little bit of nuance and emotion. Though, the tone did shift back just as quick, because we get another scene of Zereg dealing with more guilt. He knew Pym was a Skrull before the invasion started. If he wasn't so afraid of concealing his identity, perhaps the planet could have been more prepared. Now, Nick Fury noticed his turmoil and came over for a heart-to-heart, so Crusader mentions that he had suspected Pym and felt partly responsible for all the damage that was dealt in the invasion. But Fury assures him that mistakes need to belong in the past, and that he needs to believe that he is doing the right thing, and that the planet was going to be okay because of his help. This pep talk gave Crusader a second wind, and he rose to the occasion as a leader to his fellow initiates, heroically charging headfirst into the fray. There was just one small hiccup. The Skrulls had a backup plan in case the invasion failed. While they had been infiltrating the initiative, the Skrulls set up towers all across the United States that could link together and suck the nation into the negative zone, effectively wiping most of the world's superheroes off the map in an instant. But the Pym imposter was the only one with the activation codes. In the final fight, Crusader noticed that Skrull Pym was running off, and by using the Freedom Ring to grant him the power of super speed, he was able to catch up and defeat him. In a final gambit, Skrull Pym unleashed a poison that was safe to Skrulls, but lethal to humans. But that's the thing, Crusader isn't human, and with this upper hand, he finishes off Skrull Pym once and for all. With the day saved, the entire superhuman community celebrated Crusader's heroic act and Earth's continued safety. But remember how I said to stick a pin in the whole 3D man situation? Yeah, during all this, he was off somewhere else, where he had joined a group called the Skrull Kill Crew, and he became a hardened and unapologetic hitman against the Skrull Scourge. And in the process, he discovered that the goggles aren't what had the power to see through their disguises. They merely channeled it. So of course, when he makes his return, just as Crusader saved the day, 3D Man sees him in his true form. And without hesitation, he kills him off unceremoniously. In his final moments, Zereg wishes that everything could have ended differently, which activates the Freedom Ring, teleporting him away, never to be seen again. It's been nearly 2 decades since the story, and it's uncertain if Crusader is still alive. In my opinion, he is a fantastic character that I wouldn't mind seeing return. But at the same time, I think the tragedy for all of this makes for great storytelling, and his return, if handled badly, might taint the legacy of the story. But then again, Avengers: The Initiative isn't really a book that's talked about much these days, so I guess there isn't much of a legacy per se. But anyway, if you want to learn more about obscure comic characters, then you're at the right place. And maybe consider checking out my video on one of my favorite Batman villains, Lord Deathman. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.